Imagine a secret hidden deep within biblical history, something rarely mentioned, but that changes everything you think you know. You've heard of Goliath, of course, the giant defeated by David. But what if I told you that Goliath had 5 brothers, also giants, whose stories are as fascinating as his? Now, close your eyes and visualize 5 giants, each with their own legend. What did they do? Where were they while Goliath faced David? And why are these stories not told more often? Stick around, because you're about to discover secrets that have been kept in the shadows for centuries. Before we dive into the details, think about this. If Goliath was such a big challenge for David, imagine facing an entire family of giants. How would the story have been different? Would David have been able to win if he had to fight them all? And what does this reveal about the strength and faith of the young shepherd who would become Israel's greatest king? Let's open this treasure chest of mysteries and explore stories that challenge our understanding. Get ready for a journey into the unknown, where every detail can change your perception of faith, courage, and destiny. What secrets did these giants hide? And how does this impact the biblical narrative we know today? While you think about the answers, remember, sometimes what is not said is as powerful as what is revealed. What else could the Bible be hiding? And what can these giant brothers teach us about our own journey of faith? So, let's uncover these mysteries together. Stay tuned, because every second from now on is a crucial piece of this epic puzzle. And remember, the truth can be much more surprising than any fiction. Are you ready to discover? Let's go! In ancient times, the story of Goliath and his brothers unfolds in a setting filled with constant conflicts and battles. We are talking about a time when the tribes of Israel were expanding, trying to establish themselves in the land they believed was promised by God. At the same time, the Philistines, a warrior and well-organized people, were also seeking to consolidate their dominion in the region. It is in this turbulent context that narratives about giants and heroes, such as the famous story of David and Goliath, arise. The Holy Scriptures, more specifically the Old Testament, provide us with some clues about this period. The Book of Samuel is a crucial source for understanding these events, as it is there that we find the most detailed account of the battle between David and Goliath. Additionally, other biblical passages mention the Rephaim, a tribe of giants to which Goliath and his brothers belonged. These texts help us understand not only the historical context, but also the symbolic importance of these figures in the Jewish narrative. Interestingly, besides the scriptures, there are also references to these giants in apocryphal texts and oral traditions. These documents, although non-canonical, offer a richer and more detailed view of the characters and their origins. They show us how these stories were passed down from generation to generation, gaining new contours and interpretations over time. The presence of giants in the biblical account is not an isolated phenomenon. In many ancient cultures, the figure of the giant appears as a symbol of strength and danger. In the Bible, these giants are often presented as adversaries to be overcome, representing the obstacles that the people of Israel needed to overcome to fulfill their destiny. The defeat of Goliath by David, for example, is not only a military victory, but also a demonstration of the faith and courage of the young shepherd. Therefore, by analyzing the historical and biblical context of the story of Goliath and his brothers, we can see how these narratives serve to illustrate the challenges and triumphs of the people of Israel. They offer us a window into an ancient world where the struggle for survival and the quest for identity were central issues. And, more importantly, they show us how these stories continue to resonate through the centuries, inspiring generations with their lessons of courage and faith. Goliath's brothers represent an intriguing and lesser-known part of this biblical narrative. Although Goliath is the most famous, thanks to his confrontation with David, his brothers also have their own stories and characteristics that make them fascinating figures. According to apocryphal texts and oral traditions, Goliath had 5 giant brothers, each with their own name and distinct personality. First, we have Lami, who is mentioned as one of Goliath's most notable brothers. Lami is described as a formidable warrior with combat skills that rivaled those of Goliath. In some traditions, he is even considered stronger and more fearsome than his famous brother. This gives us an idea of how formidable the lineage of these giants was and how they were seen as almost insurmountable adversaries. Another brother is Saph, who also appears in accounts of battles against the Israelites. Saph is often described as a giant of great stature and strength, but not as cunning as Goliath. His presence in battles served to intimidate enemies, and he was highly respected among the Philistines. The stories about Saph show us that Goliath's family was not composed of ordinary individuals, but of exceptional warriors. Besides Lami and Saph, other brothers like Ishbi-Benob and an anonymous giant mentioned in some traditions are equally important. Ishbi-Benob is known for his attempt to avenge Goliath's death, showing the strong family bond and the desire for retribution among the brothers. The anonymous giant, on the other hand, is described as having 6 fingers on each hand and foot, a characteristic that makes him even more unique and fearsome. These characters, although not as well known as Goliath, contribute significantly to the richness of the biblical narrative. They help us better understand the culture and traditions of the Philistines, as well as the complexity of family and social relationships at that time. Through them, we can see how the figure of the giant was used not only as a symbol of brute strength, but also as a narrative element to explore themes of loyalty, vengeance, and honor. The Rephaim, the tribe to which Goliath and his brothers belonged, occupy a special place in the biblical narrative. They are often mentioned as a race of giants that inhabited the land before the arrival of the Israelites. The Rephaim are believed to have descended from ancient peoples who, according to the Bible, were known for their imposing stature and extraordinary strength. This lineage of giants is a crucial element for understanding the mythology and history of ancient Israel. The first mentions of the Rephaim appear in the book of Genesis, where they are listed among the peoples who inhabited Canaan. They are described as powerful warriors, and their presence in the Promised Land was one of the reasons why the Israelites were so afraid to enter it. The figure of the Rephaim served to symbolize the great challenges that the people of Israel would have to face to fulfill their destiny. The lineage of the Rephaim is also highlighted in other parts of the Bible, such as in the book of Deuteronomy and the book of Joshua. In Deuteronomy, it is said that the last of the Rephaim, Og, king of Bashan, was defeated by Moses and the Israelites. This defeat is seen as an important milestone in the conquest of the Promised Land. In Joshua, the Rephaim are again mentioned as formidable adversaries that needed to be overcome for the Israelites to settle. Goliath and his brothers, being direct descendants of this tribe of giants, inherited not only the imposing stature, but also the fame and fear that the Rephaim inspired. They were seen as the last representatives of an almost mythical race, and their symbolic defeats marked the end of an era and the beginning of another. The presence of these giants in the biblical narrative serves to reinforce the idea that the people of Israel, with divine help, were able to overcome even the greatest challenges. Besides the scriptures, the lineage of the Rephaim is also explored in apocryphal texts and oral traditions, which offer additional details about their origins and characteristics. These accounts show us that the figure of the giant was a recurring theme in various ancient cultures, not just in the Jewish tradition. Through these texts, we can see how the lineage of the Rephaim was used to weave narratives about courage, faith, and the fight against seemingly insurmountable adversities. In summary, the Rephaim and their lineage of giants play a fundamental role in the biblical narrative. They are not just historical characters, but also symbols of challenges and obstacles that needed to be overcome for the people of Israel to fulfill their destiny. Through these stories, we can see how the figure of the giant was used to explore universal themes of courage, faith, and perseverance, which continue to resonate to this day. When we think of giants, various cultures around the world come to mind that have their own versions of these imposing beings. The story of Goliath's brothers is not unique, and many ancient peoples told stories of giants that walked the earth. In Greek mythology, for example, we have the Titans, who were giant gods with immense powers. Like Goliath and his brothers, the Titans were seen as formidable beings capable of performing extraordinary feats. Norse mythology also presents us with the Jotuns or frost giants, who frequent the sagas and were enemies of the Asur gods. The tales of giants are not limited to the West. In Hindu mythology, there are narratives about the Rakshasas, gigantic demons who frequently faced heroes in epic battles. These beings, like Goliath's brothers, were feared and respected for their strength and size. The comparison between these different cultures shows that the idea of giants is deeply rooted in the human psyche. Perhaps these myths arose to explain natural phenomena or simply to give life to the fertile imagination of the ancients. Another interesting legend is that of the Nephilim, mentioned in the Bible, who are often compared to the giants in Goliath's narrative. In the book of Genesis, the Nephilim are described as the descendants of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These mysterious creatures are often interpreted as giants with extraordinary strength and abilities. Although the connection between the Nephilim and Goliath's brothers is not explicit, many scholars and theologians make this connection due to the similarities in descriptions and the biblical context. Goliath's brothers also echo in Celtic legends, where the Fomorians, a race of deformed giants, were enemies of the gods and heroes. Like Goliath's brothers, the Fomorians were often portrayed as villains in epic battles. These comparisons between cultures show that the figure of the giant is a constant in global mythology, always being a symbol of challenge and adversity for heroes. Finally, it is interesting to observe how these legends and mythologies interact with each other and with the biblical narrative. The presence of giants in various cultures suggests a universal need to create imposing figures that challenge heroes and represent almost insurmountable obstacles. Goliath's brothers, then, are not only part of the biblical story, but also of a vast panorama of myths and legends that have enriched the human imagination over the centuries. Goliath and his brothers were not just isolated figures, they played a crucial role in Philistine society. The Philistines were a warrior people, and the presence of giants like Goliath and his brothers certainly increased their prestige and fear among their enemies. Goliath, in particular, was seen as the champion of the Philistines, an invincible warrior who symbolized the strength and power of his people. This image of Goliath as an invincible giant was used both to intimidate adversaries and to inspire the Philistines themselves. Philistine society, like many others of the time, valued physical strength and combat skills. Goliath and his brothers, with their imposing statures and fighting abilities, were likely figures of great respect and admiration. They represented the ideal warrior in Philistine culture, where battlefield prowess was one of the most important virtues. The presence of these giants in Philistine society would also have had a significant psychological impact, boosting the morale of the troops and intimidating enemies. In addition to being formidable warriors, Goliath and his brothers might have played leadership roles within Philistine society. In ancient cultures, the strongest warriors often became leaders, and it is not difficult to imagine that Goliath, with his fame and skills, held a position of command. His brothers, although less well-known, might also have held prominent positions, helping to lead Philistine troops in various battles and military expeditions. The presence of giants like Goliath in Philistine society also reflected on diplomatic and political relations. The fame of Goliath and his brothers surely spread beyond Philistine borders, influencing how other peoples viewed the Philistines. The reputation of having giants in their ranks could have served as a form of deterrence, discouraging attacks and promoting an image of invincibility. This strategy of using imposing figures to intimidate enemies was not uncommon in antiquity and reinforced the Philistines' position in the region. Finally, Goliath's death at the hands of David had a profound impact on Philistine society. The defeat of their champion not only shook the morale of the Philistine troops, but also challenged the perception of invincibility that the giants represented. Goliath's fall marked a turning point in Philistine history, showing that despite their strength and size, even giants could be defeated. This had repercussions both in the war against the Israelites and in the Philistines' own identity as a warrior people. Goliath's brothers were not just mythological figures, they were actively involved in various battles and confrontations throughout history. Besides the famous battle between David and Goliath, there are records of other conflicts in which Goliath's brothers played significant roles. These confrontations were often against the Israelites, who saw the giants as an existential threat. The presence of these giants on the battlefield was a true test of courage and skill for the Israelite warriors. One of the most notable confrontations involving Goliath's brothers was the battle in which Sibbecai, one of David's mighty men, killed Saph, another Philistine giant. This battle is mentioned in the second book of Samuel, and it shows that the Israelites were willing to face these giants despite the fear and intimidation they provoked. Each victory against one of Goliath's brothers was a monumental achievement, boosting the Israelites' morale and reinforcing their faith in God. Another significant episode was the battle in which Elhanan, son of Jair, killed another brother of Goliath, whose name is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible. This event is recorded in 2 Samuel 21 verse 19, and is a clear example that Goliath's brothers were specific targets in battles. Victories against these giants were seen as signs of divine favor and were celebrated as great heroic feats. Each giant defeated was proof that the Israelites' strength and faith could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. Confrontations with Goliath's brothers were not limited to pitched battles. There are records of smaller skirmishes and ambushes where the Israelites faced these giants. These small battles were equally important, as they showed that the threat of the giants was constant and omnipresent. Israelite warriors who faced and defeated these giants became local heroes, gaining respect and admiration from their compatriots. Finally, the narrative of these confrontations and battles involving Goliath's brothers serves to illustrate the importance of courage and faith in the face of seemingly insurmountable adversities. Each battle won against a giant was a victory not only military, but also spiritual. The Israelites saw these victories as proofs of divine support and the righteousness of their cause. Thus, the story of Goliath's brothers and the confrontations they were involved in continue to be remembered as examples of bravery and determination in biblical tradition. The story of Goliath and his brothers is rich in details and nuances, but at the same time, it is surrounded by a series of interpretations and discrepancies that make the study of this theme even more fascinating. One of the most debated points is the issue of the names and numbers of Goliath's brothers. Some biblical sources mention only one brother, while other sources, such as apocryphal texts and oral traditions, speak of up to 4 additional brothers. This variation can be attributed to different manuscript traditions and the oral transmission of the story over the centuries. Furthermore, there is significant discussion about the physical characteristics and abilities of Goliath's brothers. Some interpretations suggest that they, like Goliath, were giants endowed with superhuman strength and exceptional combat skills. However, other scholars argue that these descriptions may be exaggerated or symbolic, representing the threat and power of the Philistines in a more dramatic way. The interpretation of these characteristics often depends on the theological or cultural perspective of the interpreter. Another point of discrepancy is the historical and geographical context of the battles involving Goliath's brothers. Some sources suggest that these battles occurred in specific locations and at determined times, while others are more vague or contradictory. For example, the battle between David and Goliath is well documented, but the stories about confrontations with his brothers are less clear and often open to varied interpretations. This lack of clarity can be attributed to the fragmented nature of ancient sources and the difficulty of reconciling different traditions. Theological interpretations also play a crucial role in the discrepancies about Goliath's brothers. Some scholars see these figures as symbolic representations of evil and opposition to Israel, while others consider them real historical characters. The way these figures are interpreted can vary significantly between different denominations and religious traditions. For example, some Christian theologians may see the giants as symbols of sin and rebellion against God, while others may emphasize their historical and cultural importance. Finally, the question of the giants' lineage and their relation to the Rephaim is also a source of debate. Some traditions suggest that Goliath's brothers belonged to a lineage of giants that dated back to pre-flood times, while other sources are more skeptical about this connection. This discrepancy can be seen as a result of different textual traditions and the influence of mythologies and legends from other cultures. In the end, the interpretation of these stories often depends on the lens through which they are viewed, be it historical, theological, or cultural. The story of Goliath and his brothers has transcended the pages of the Bible and infiltrated deeply into popular culture, literature, and the arts over the centuries. Since ancient times, this narrative has been a rich source of inspiration for writers, artists, and storytellers. In literature, the figure of the giant, often represented by Goliath, has become an archetype of the formidable enemy that must be defeated by the hero. One of the most iconic representations is the battle between David and Goliath, which symbolizes the victory of the small over the great, the weak over the strong. In art, the influence of the story of Goliath and his brothers can be seen in a wide range of works, from Renaissance frescoes and paintings to modern sculptures and illustrations. Artists like Michelangelo and Caravaggio created masterpieces that capture the intensity and drama of the battle between David and Goliath. These artistic representations not only perpetuate the biblical narrative, but also reinterpret it, adding layers of meaning and emotion that resonate with audiences of different eras. Besides literature and visual arts, the story of Goliath and his brothers has also found a place in contemporary popular culture. Films, television series, and comic books often use the figure of the giant as a powerful metaphor. The theme of fighting against an apparently invincible adversary is a universal narrative that continues to fascinate and inspire. For example, fantasy and adventure films often feature heroes facing giants, mirroring the struggle of David against Goliath and his brothers. Music has also not been immune to the influence of this epic narrative. Songs and operas over the centuries have incorporated elements of the story of David and Goliath, often using the giant metaphor to explore themes of overcoming and triumph. From religious hymns celebrating David's victory to popular songs that use the story as a metaphor for personal challenges, the cultural influence of this narrative is vast and multifaceted. Finally, the story of Goliath and his brothers also has a significant impact on education and psychology. In classrooms, the Battle of David and Goliath is often used to teach lessons about courage, faith, and determination. In psychology, the metaphor of the Goliath complex is used to describe situations where a person or group faces an apparently insurmountable adversary. This narrative continues to be a rich source of inspiration and reflection, demonstrating its enduring power and ability to adapt to different cultural and temporal contexts. And so, we find that the story of Goliath's 5 giant brothers is much deeper and more intriguing than we imagined. Each of them, with their own legends and mysteries, makes us reflect on the grandeur of God's plans and the complexity of the battles fought by his people. But now I ask you, what do these stories have to do with our lives today? Are we facing our own giants in our daily lives? And how can we, like David, find the courage and faith needed to overcome them? Think about it. If Goliath and his brothers represented immense challenges for the Israelites, what are the modern Goliaths that we need to overcome? Could they be internal fears, financial difficulties, family problems, or crises of faith? And how can we arm ourselves with the same confidence and determination that David had? Moreover, did you know there are other biblical accounts that mention battles against giants? How about exploring these stories together in a future video? Who were these other giants, and what do they symbolize for us today? And speaking of symbols, have you ever wondered why the Bible tells us so many stories about giants? What does God want to teach us through these narratives? Let's reflect on this. So, if you're as intrigued as we are and want to continue this journey exploring the fascinating biblical stories and their meanings, don't forget to subscribe to the Words of Maranatha channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. And before you go, leave a comment. What giant are you facing in your life? And how can we help you find strength and faith to overcome it? We can't wait to read your stories and continue this incredible exchange of experiences and learning. Until next time, and remember, together, we are stronger than any giant.